Hello and welcome to Hug in the Snug, where today I am joined by Nick Silver, the co-founder of the Climate Bond Initiative. It's not called Hug in the Snug for nothing, so we're going to kick off with a hug, if that's alright with you.
Oh, that was a surprise.
Best way to start any interview, I say. Okay, so today we're going to talk about how can climate bonds save the planet.
Okay, in how many words?
If you could do that in 5 words.
5 words.
Maybe 10.
Okay, well, if we want to solve the climate change problem, i.e. to stop the global temperatures increasing to a dangerous level, what it boils down to is shifting all our investment that is currently in fossil fuel, which powers us, into the low carbon economy, being stuff like renewable energy, energy efficiency. And the purpose of the Climate Bonds Initiative is a start of how you do that, how you shift that investment from what is currently invested into the new industrial revolution that's needed.
Okay, so back to basics. What is a climate bond?
What is a climate bond? Well, what a bond is. A bond is a way of raising large-scale capital to do stuff like, so the government spends more money than it gets in, so it funds itself by issuing a bond, which is a financial instrument which is bought by typically a pension fund or other institutional investor. And that allows the government to do things. It does 2 things. One is it spends money, but it also can invest things like build bridges or tunnels or new rail, and that's the traditional use of a bond. So a climate bond is a bond, but which is used for things like building renewable energy, wind farms, or allowing companies to raise money to work on energy efficiency, that sort of.
Okay, and if it's a bond that is a way of raising investment, where would that investment be raised from?
Well, that's the easy question. The only people, we're kind of under the illusion that the governments sort of decide what needs to happen or in control, but actually the people in our world that allocate capital are institutional investors like pension funds and insurance companies or sovereign wealth funds. They decide on where the capital or all of our savings goes, and that determines the world we live in. So
there's already a source of sort of investment. It's just at the moment it goes into other types of bonds. And what you're saying is if we had a system for climate bonds, then we could be pouring that investment into where it needs to be.
Yeah, at the moment we're locked into the economy that we have, which is powered by fossil fuels. So pension fund will have a substantial investment in BP shares, for example, not picking out BP in particular, or BP Shell shares, and in other things like it will be invested in Google. But and with time, as we gradually run out of fossil fuels, become more expensive, things like solar become more competitive, and there will become very large solar companies which pension funds will invest in. But unfortunately, we don't have the time, so we have to artificially speed that process up. And there are 2 sorts of stalling things. There are 3. One is that we already power ourselves by burning coal, or we already power our cars in oil. So we're not starting from, should we build a new, we want to power ourselves, should we build a new coal station or should we build a new solar station? We've already got a coal station, so we actually have to shut that down and build a new solar farm. So that's one thing. The second thing is renewable energy. We don't use it for a reason. It's more expensive than traditional energy, but it's not that much more expensive. In a lot of parts of the world, solar energy is actually almost grid parity, which means it's almost as cheap as producing stuff from elsewhere. And the third thing is it's new. So if I'm an investor, I'm thinking, should I invest in this coal station or should I invest in this solar farm? Well, I'm thinking, well, I know I've got a department who knows about coal. They understand it's got a long track record. I don't know this new stuff. I don't know, so I'm a bit averse to it. So all that means that while the investment going into renewable energy has increased massively recently, it hasn't increased massively enough or nearly enough, and we as a society need to do some artificially help that along. One of the things, what we're targeting at Climate Bonds is, as I said before, the price differential between, say, solar and other traditional forms of energy isn't that great. And one of the reasons is if you can make the cost that renewable energy producers borrow money at cheaper, it could tip the balance, and so it will then become cheaper than other energy, and when it becomes cheaper, then the money, it's like turning on a tap, the investment will flow in at scale. So it's like, it's like having two baths. At the moment, the bath of renewable energy is slightly higher than the bath of non-renewable energy. If you can just lower it, then the water will immediately flow.
So is that how the climate, and would these all be government bonds, or can they?
Well, we've picked on bonds. We could effectively, institutions invest into what should I call them? Animals. They invest in equity, which is stocks and shares or bonds, about half and half in each. So ultimately, if we look 50 years time, there'll be a universe or a zoo of animals of renewable energy. But at the moment, in stocks and shares. But at the moment, there aren't companies who are large enough. So if we have to focus on the other side, which are bonds. And so climate bonds at the moment, they're a very small universe of them. Most of them are government or quasi-government. But going forward, the idea behind the climate bonds initiative is that a private developer, for example, a renewable energy developer could raise a climate bond to raise finance, and that would be in some way preferenced by governments. The government will say, well, I'll insure this or I'll guarantee it. So the government can put its balance sheet behind it, and that means that the renewable energy producer can borrow money much cheaper than if he went to a bank or
so is that part of enabling that having the bond there or having it is sort of underwritten by the government means that it's not just putting a vehicle in place for that investment, it's de-risking it by being able to borrow at a lower rate? Is that
that's right.
And that's how bonds will encourage this kind of early stage of investment till we get to the point where there's enough successful big companies out there that they'll look like an attractive proposition of their own.
Exactly, and bonds and by themselves are only part of the solution. So you mentioned early stage. Well, actually, a bond is best for quite late stage things that we already know how to do, like a wind farm, for things like biofuel, which is at a much earlier stage than another kind of arrangement and incentive structure from the government is required. So, but what we're moving to is actually looking at here's the scoping the problem. The problem is, how do we get investment at scale from flowing into the new carbon economy? But there's not one solution. There are lots of different problems within that to crack, and you have to have quite a detailed understanding of what the blockages are in each given sector, which sectors are important, and for governments and other institutions like what are called multilateral institutions like the EIB or the World Bank, how they can lend their weight to support this investment.
So really, climate bonds have their place because they're filling a kind of investment funding gap where for a certain stage and getting the right scale of investment in, that's to you why climate bonds can save the planet, because it's a gap that's needed that they can fill. Yeah,
it's a gap. It's part, but it's not the only gap.
Yeah,
and we're not portraying it as being saving the planet by themselves. There's lots of, and ultimately what is required is for governments to take it seriously, thinking like this is a problem. Climate change, or the way we power ourselves, it's a problem. It's an immediate problem which we have to face up to now. But it's not actually such a difficult moral problem. It's actually an engineering and financing problem. And we, a government, could do this by having a central plan, like we power ourselves this way. How are we going to change that power? And that means we need to build a wind farm here and here. We need to make actually mandate that people have to reduce their energy use, but help, and we have to provide finance or access to finance to do that.
So for these, it sounds like bonds really, they could make a difference, and it's, but the government has to want to.
Yeah.
What can individuals or businesses do to themselves to encourage that to happen, to encourage these things to get set up, to help or to push governments?
Well, I've got sort of two answers to that. My first is that actually individuals, it's a kind of macro, for me I've said it's a macro engineering problem, so individuals can't by themselves do that much. But on the other hand, they, for one, they can do what you are doing, so they're thinking, well, actually, one, this is a very important space, and I therefore need to use my creative creative energy and imagination and set up businesses, to solve this problem. And also, it's a growing area, so hopefully a business will be successful because this is one of the expanding areas of the economy. So one thing they can is it walk the walk or walk the talk? And secondly, they can actually reduce their own energy use. And I'm not saying this in any because I'm unholier than thou, but if you lag your roof, put double glazing, switch to LED lights, you actually make yourself financially a lot better off. It's a no-brainer, and it's just a question of personal. Let's bother doing this.
Effort.
Yeah,
always.
Effort.
All right. So, climate bonds have their place in saving the planet. With one of the biggest challenges, which is investment in the technologies and infrastructure that we need to move to a low carbon future. But we all still have our part to play,
yes.
And don't want to lag behind. All right, brilliant. Well, thank you for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me.